Want to drive faster? Listen in as Kinch Rendell, an SCCA National Trophy winner and multi-time Pro Solo champion himself, interviews the best autocrossers in the land. He talks fast and drives even faster. And now here's your host, Kinch Rendell.
Hello, this is Kinch. This episode features Howard and Linda Duncan. Originally, I was going to interview Linda, and then she suggested the thought of interviewing both of them. And they happened to be taking a trip in the car out to Denver, so they had plenty of time. Now, this was recorded in the car on a speakerphone, so I have taken quite a bit of time trying to cut out all the road noise possible. Luckily, Audacity helps with that hugely. So if it's a little bit weird at times, it's because maybe I didn't get quite all of it leveled out just right. I've gone in and once again taken out and added in. This goes for about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I've got another show already recorded that goes about that length as well. It's something I've realized I like listening to Tim Ferriss's interviews that are long like this. If you're listening on the website, you might have to remember where you're cutting it off or where you're stopping or pausing. But if you're listening through iTunes, it should be able to pause for you when you'd like to pause. And for episodes, I'm almost always listening on headphones. So I would suggest for something if it's a little bit hard to hear, find your headphones, plug them in. Let me know what you think. I appreciate them sharing. We cover so many topics from their beginnings decades ago to Pro Solo to what may change, may not change, to street survival. The list goes on and on. Check the show notes if you'd like to see more of those listed out. Thanks for listening.
I always had interest in cars and racing. My mom, while she was carrying me, went to the Roundy Around races up in New England and claims that when I was between 2 and 3, I could name every car on the road, though I couldn't necessarily pronounce it real well. But so I've been a car buff since the beginning. But and sports cars in particular, living in Florida, with Sebring and Daytona, that was sort of part of the environment down there, and but became particularly hooked in it around high school when I got a couple of chances to ride in sports cars. My family was non-car people once we got past that early stages of the stock car racing. And so I got rides home from school in a TR3 and then later with a relative up back in New England at a wedding in a Sunbeam Alpine through some twisty roads around the mountain areas. And I was hooked at that point. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, when I was in college, I decided to take a pause from fishing as my main hobby and decided I wanted to go back in sports cars and found MGB for sale on the Student Union bulletin board. I ended up buying it. Was just enjoying it for the joy of driving it, the noise and the convertible and all that. And one day, one of the parking lots for the students, somebody was walking by and noticed the car had a University of South Florida Sports Car Club sticker on it. Asked why I hadn't come to the meetings. And I said, the sticker was on the car when I got it. Didn't know anything about it. He invited me to a meeting that was the next day, and I gathered up a couple of my other buddies, and we went. They were showing old racing movies, real films, 35 millimeter, and I was further hooked. And it turned out a week or two later, they were having their annual Speed Week promotion. This was clubs on campus promoting, membership in their club, the sports car club. Always had one of the biggest booths because they would bring in the school, allow them to bring cars in and park them on the grass and the sidewalks in between the student union and administration building. And so I sort of joined in on just hanging around. I didn't know enough to answer any questions at that point, but liked being around it. And I was telling Linda that I was really hooked when towards the end of this, the last day, some local businessmen they had become aware of put his Ford GT on display and had it sitting there on the sidewalks where normally bikes and people are just walking. And the day that this closed down, he came back and fired it up and drove it down the sidewalks between the buildings, and hearing that car, this exhaust echo off the two buildings as he skedaddled his way to the street was another cementing point of this is what I got to do. But it really wasn't until the following year that I got involved in autocrossing just because of school and time constraints, and finally went to an event late in the season in 1970, I guess this was, and then as soon as the season started up in Florida, that meant going all the way from December to February. I was standing at the front of the line to enter my first event, and quickly discovered that I enjoyed helping put the events on almost as much as the driving. So again, started out in MGBs, and then from there it went through a whole series of cars in the 70s, even a Toyota pickup truck we had for a while, a Datsun 1200, the Chevy Nova, early cam car for me, and then back to MGs a couple of times, and ultimately in the mid-'80s, I started sharing rides, actually using someone else's car. Dave Welch down in Florida had actually a Solo V to begin with. Went to my first national in '85, and then after we did pretty well there, he bought a Formula Ford, so we ran that until 1990, I guess. I took the job with SCCA, but during that period, when we started the SCCA program in Florida, Central Florida, because all autocrossing in Florida had been independent clubs up until '82, '83, when me and Danny Shields, Dave Welch, and a few others decided to try putting on SCCA events, bringing things together, and effectively doing what we think of now as champ tours. These were big sites that we had access to in those days, and said, okay, we'll specialize in the big 2-day events and do a half a dozen or so of those a year, and the local clubs would do the smaller 1-day events at smaller venues. And there it sort of expanded out. We ended up buying out, if you will, a number of those smaller clubs. And by the time I started on the SCB in '86 or '7, and stepped away from the local program, we were running about 35 events a year under the SCCA banner across Central Florida region, so basically almost one every weekend.
And why were you doing that? Just to have more events, or was it like a business?
No, it became almost an obsession. Central Florida is actually, the region is, well, not geographically large compared to regions, say, out west, but went from the east coast of Florida to the west coast, and almost up to the northern boundary down to Lake Okeechobee, and there were various pockets of areas that were interested. We came out of the Tampa area mostly, and had run events all over the Tampa Bay area. That when we first got started, there was a council of clubs in Tampa, and we ran the USF Sports Car Club as well as McDill Sports Car Club, and there was GCAC, and there was British Car Club, and a whole bunch of others of those days. Corvette and the Mustang Club. I mean, you could actually run a couple of events each weekend in Florida in the early '70s. But some of us had started paying attention, seeing the news coming out of SCCA about a national championship and all of that. So we started being curious about how putting an SCCA banner on all this might help. But when we finally started the Central Florida region one, it was just a group of us that said we wanted to be involved in a relatively small number of big events. We were infatuated with the idea of national, divisional events, and started that series of 5 to 6 big events, and we had access to about 4 or 5 different sites. We ran Sebring twice a year, I think, and others once a year. And by big sites, I mean we didn't even consider a site that we would use for SCCA unless the course would be at least 90 seconds long, and some of them were 2.5 minutes long. So this was the golden age of sites, because it's obviously rare to find any place these days with that kind of space. Of course, realizing the cars were slower back then.
We were able to get on form.
But still, and the expansion beyond that was not a business thing. It was just I was the chairman of the Central Florida region, and we started having small pockets within the area, the Orlando group, the East Coast area, and of course the Tampa area where I was from, all interested in having their own local monthly events. And ultimately, we just ended up absorbing the local clubs that were in each of those areas, buying their equipment, and so we effectively had, 3 chapters of Central Florida region, each running monthly events, as well as our 4 to 6 big events that were everybody coming together to put those on.
And how did Linda get into this? You met, married, Linda got sucked in, or did you meet her at an event? Tell it from your side, Linda.
Well, I actually was more of a car show person and loved to go to the Roundy Round tracks on Friday evening with my dad. And when Howard went to work for my dad, he joined us. And it started from there. I found out later on that I liked looking at them, but I really preferred driving them. And when Howard was first starting this, Sharon Shields and I didn't get to drive. We were the timers. And finally we looked at each other one day and said, why are we sitting here while the boys are playing? And we finally decided, the heck with that. And when we first told them we wanted to drive, oh my God, you should have seen their eyes. But they managed to show us how to shift, and we did it, and we started, and we just have not stopped since. I got into the Formula Ford with Howard and Dave and had some fun in that, and a little scary incident here and there. And I have driven everything from Mini Coopers to those Formula Fords, but basically in the beginning I was kind of along for the ride and just enjoying being around the cars and having fun.
So what year was that you started racing?
I started in the early 70s, just a little bit after Howard, probably.
Probably 72.
71, late 71, early 72. And that's when it started. I just started driving the MG. Have to admit, it's difficult to drive an MG at my height because you look through the steering wheel, not over it. So that took a little bit of effort, but it made me look up. But yeah, that's how I got started. I helped Howard with the organizing, but then again, remember I was raising it and going to college and doing all kinds of things that took a lot more time than I expected. So he was on his own. Jeff, our son was pulled along as we ran with Sharon and Danny's daughter as well. So we had our own little playpen station wagon. And we'd put the kids in there, and one of us would stay with them while the rest of them were running. It was perfect. Great family activity.
I've not roped mine into it totally yet. That's kind of a blessing, I think, but we have an FJC cart sitting here. We've rode it a few times.
But yeah, it's just silly fun for me, actually. I just drive because I like to drive. I didn't get into so much of the planning until after I moved to Kansas, honestly. I mean, I did do some of I was a lead instructor in Colorado region when we moved out there for a couple of events, the driver schools that we had. I got to do street survival, of course, and street survival at the national level for 3 years, which is a pure passion for me to help people drive more safely on the road. But yeah, I just have fun and I do the things I want to do, and I don't do anything else.
What was the transition from Florida? Where'd you guys move after that?
Oh, that was interesting. Howard was on the SEV, and there was some transition period going, and the position for tech, which I believe is Doug's job right now, Howard was offered that job, but I was teaching and tried to get a certain number of years in before I left Florida. So he was asked a couple of times, and when they asked him the third time, I had my years in, and we could move to Colorado then, and he could take that position because teaching, of course, I can do just about anywhere. So we did that, and Jeff was 8 at the time when we moved, and it just seemed like the perfect time to do that kind of a move. That's how we got to Colorado and to the SCCA, and then there was this move to Kansas. That's unique all by itself. But we're here.
Yes, because I moved out here in like 98 or 97, and your headquarters were here, I think, in the tech center, if I remember correctly. I went to the building at least once.
Correct. Yeah, we're down in Englewood in the tech center, yeah.
So that's why you moved out here, because the job basically said, hey, you're working
as a tech manager, let's say, you need to be here?
Yeah, it was actually more tech was part of it. In those days, I was the solo manager in general because I was charged with overseeing solo nationals and developing new programs as well as answering inquiries. I had been on the solo events board. I had, for a couple of years, had been the field operations manager for Pro Solo. And then when they had a shake-up and change in personnel and were expanding staffing, they came to me and said, would you be interested? And after having been out there a few times for SED meetings, and coming from Florida and into a drier climate, the idea of being able to walk out in the morning and take a walk and not be dripping wet in 5 minutes struck me as kind of neat, plus the view of the mountain. So I'd set it in the back of my mind that if an opportunity ever presented itself and it worked for us as a family, I would probably jump at it, even though I had about 19 years in with Hillsborough County in Tampa, and I was within 10 or 11 years of being able to retire. So I kid folks that rather than being hassled with some of the stuff that we're constantly struggling with, I could have been sitting out in Tampa Bay on my boat fishing most of the time in a house that would have been paid for by that point.
Come on, I know you enjoy sitting there starting cars more than sitting on a boat. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. He does both quite well.
But the transition was, is not as significant as a lot of our friends in Florida and the Southeast were often thinking. Because I moved out there in the winter of 1990, and as it turned out, I moved just about a week before they had a really record Arctic blast with a temperature I don't think got over 10 for over 2 weeks. And so I'd be getting these calls from friends in Florida saying, how in the world are you adjusting to it? And I just kept saying, well, it's a dry cold. It doesn't really bother me. But even for a year or two after that, folks from Florida or Southeast would call me and still ask about it. And I said, no, I really do love it here. I said, if the job at SCCA didn't work out and I had to drive a school bus or something, I would probably stay just because we were enjoying the life in Colorado so much.
Let's face it, they had to put seatbelts in that school.
I have a hard time explaining the weather here because I came from Texas outside of Houston. And they're just like, it's so cold all the time. I'm like, no, it's sunny. You don't need but a long sleeve shirt or sweater on right now. It's 50 or 40 degrees. It's fine. People cannot get that through their heads when they think about humidity and cold.
Yep.
Yeah. We absolutely loved it. Plus, we got the chance to live in the Rockies. When we first moved there, I asked Howard, where could I look for a house? And he said, it has to be within 45 minutes of the office. So I got to the office. I drove 45 minutes into the mountains and found the most beautiful scenery I'd ever seen in my life. Because, granted, I'm coming from flat. But if I couldn't have water, I was going into those mountains. And sure enough, we were able to find a place in the Rockies, 20 minutes in, that was absolutely spectacular. And then I landed a job at the very last school in Jefferson County in Pine, Colorado, which was another 20 minutes into the mountains from our house. And every day I went to work, I swear, for 13 years. It was like driving into a picture-perfect postcard. It was spectacular. And it was beautiful. I never, ever got tired of Colorado, ever.
Compared to Kansas, you mean?
Kansas is unique, and I retired here. That's the part I still haven't figured out. I retired here. I don't think of Kansas as my final destination. Let's put it that way. You never know, though. Whatever. There is a certain charm to it. It is definitely a different culture, and I have had to put the brakes on full hard. But it's only taken me, 6 years now I've been retired, and a good 6 years to take a deep breath and deal with it.
Yeah, for me it's kind of hard to imagine now that we've actually been in Kansas longer than we were in Colorado, because when I agreed to move from Colorado out here in 2002, I guess, I'd indicated to the president that I said, okay, this is kind of a 1-year trial to help the transition, and I'll see how it is. Then it became sort of a 2-year trial, and then there were changes in who the president was. And I said, okay, we'll stretch this out a little further. Linda came back to Colorado to finish up her years for retirement there, so we spent 5 years commuting back and forth. Again, I've never really felt like we settled in. Like we're waiting for the next thing to make the decision about what we're doing and where we're going to.
What's next?
God, to have spent 13 years in transition.
Yeah. Hey, that's all life is. One place to another. See the world. See America. You guys, okay, let me tell people I can put it in the intro as well. But you were in Arkansas yesterday, or partially Arkansas, 2 days ago at the Pro. You drove back home.
Yeah.
Now you're driving out to Colorado. How many?
To pick grandbabies.
Yes, to pick the grandkids. These are the best grandparents ever. I need to let my mom know that she should come pick up my kids for several weeks. Otherwise, she's slacking, and she could even she could bring them to races and support me there and support the kids. I mean, there's lots of things she needs to get on her list. You guys are helping me. How many miles? Yeah, how many miles do you guys drive a year? Do you even track something like that?
Oh, it's spread between so many vehicles. I mean, I know I drive for SCCA in the trucks probably 25,000 miles, I'm going to guess, towing the trailer, and then our own driving, I know I'm above the average of the 12,000, 15,000, so I'm going to say 20. So, that's somewhere approaching 50,000 miles a year.
Yeah, that doesn't include our moms and siblings are in Florida, so we make at least 2 to 3 trips there every year.
Do you fly on an airplane at all, ever?
Only when we're forced to.
And there's time constraints, and I have to admit, at times I go, this is really marvelous. 4 hours, I can be most anywhere.
Yeah.
And then our plane is canceled, delayed, or whatever, and we go, forget this junk.
Yes, direct flights would be nice. I will say that I was in Fort Myers the last couple of weeks, thus I missed Arkansas. And flying back, not direct, set us in Chicago for an extra 4 hours.
Yeah. Chicago's nice, but.
Yes. Oh, and you're probably familiar. I was looking for races down there since I was down there for a complete weekend, and I pulled up something. There was pro solos down in Fort Myers that were like 90 seconds aside or something crazy, someplace down there.
Is that Darren?
Well, I don't know what that would. I know they've got a site in Fort Myers between Fort Myers and Lehigh. It's an area we used for National Solo for a few years. It's part of an old airport that the mosquito control folks use, or actually control it. They use part of it, rent it out. But I didn't know they were running anything that looked like a pro solo.
Oh, I think it was maybe an official pro solo years ago, or maybe it was the Gulf autocross group.
Definitely.
Yeah, we've been there. It's been about 10 years since we were there, yeah, it was run by it's a local group, Gulf Coast Autocrossers, that oversee it. We've talked with them over the last couple of years, trying to get back there, but it's sorting out some logistical issues, and now some of the homes, the area, when the Depression or recession hit, was, from an autocrossing standpoint, was good news because they'd started building houses right up next to the fence, literally. The backyards right up against where we were running. Then as the recession hit, that was one of those overbuilt areas in Florida, and those houses became vacant. And so it was good from that standpoint. And now, as things are recovering, those houses are now populated again. So obviously sound issues come into play when someone's backyard is literally, less than 100 feet from where cars will be running.
Oh. The SCCA should buy all those houses and rent them out. I like it.
Right.
We keep saying that SCCA needs to buy a track, build condos in the center, and we'll all come.
Exactly. You can get whatever rent.
Yeah.
Probably garages down below. You can pull your car in with lifts. Marvelous.
It sounds like Hastings, Nebraska to me.
No kidding. I used to look at some property out that direction from here, and stuff is quite cheap. I don't know who can make it to an autocross there, but you can get some cheap land.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole track and setup at Hastings and the owner is great. It's just he's about 200 or 300 miles too far north for me.
Amen.
So take us through some of the cars you really enjoyed driving that come back to your mind of things you've really enjoyed. Start with cars you've owned. What really stands out to you?
Wow. Well, I'll always have a fond spot for my first MGB. It was 63, which is the first year of import, which didn't mean anything to me at the time I bought it. But ultimately, through a variety of things, I was able to save the body plate for it, and it was the 512th one ever imported into the U.S. Again, being a silly 20-something-year-old, I never realized that might actually mean something years into the future, and ended up selling the car for parts. And it was sawed up, but the guy was nice enough to take the plate off and give it to me. In fact, I've even got the title for that car. But almost nothing will replace the feelings you have, for that first time you're autocrossing something, you're discovering a new sport, building your skills. We had a site in north of Tampa, Dade City, was the fairgrounds, and we used to kid that it was a miniature version of Road Atlanta, because it was a motorcycle road course that had a lot of elevation changes, which is unusual in Florida, and just a twisties. And actually, the layout even was a little bit like Road Atlanta. But that was my second or third autocross was at this site in Dade City, Florida. And so that connection of that site and that car, and in early stages of learning how to drive and having those sort of big improvements you get early in your driving history or career, sort of link all that together. So I'm sure if I could have that car time transported now, I'd get in and drive and say, this is just a piece of junk with slow steering and bad brakes, and my memories of how fast it was would all be wiped away. But that first MG was super special to me.
Yeah, memories are relative, aren't they? At the time, it's great, but they've improved things.
Oh, yes. Since we decided a few years ago to purchase another MGB, because we had fond memories of that MGB, and we have discovered that you cannot go back. That's all there is to it. That MGB left us about 6 months ago, and it was a very happy day.
You're like, there are creature comforts now that you like and things that just work, huh?
Yeah.
And it was a serious money pit.
Actually, one of the cars that I came to like a lot, it was early, this is a couple of years later, 73, 74, was a Datsun 1200. Now, not much of a power car, but again, in those days, the courses were significantly tighter than they are today, both gate widths and lengths of slaloms and all this. And we had just started traveling a bit around the state, going to events outside of Tampa. And when we had this Datsun 1200, it was sort of the essence of almost what street is today, in that we just threw on. We were able to buy, I think they were Beardsteins, if I remember the brand right. They're 12-inch tires, wheels. So the tires were really cheap, even in those days. And put those on and drive it all over the state, run events, do really well, because the car just was amazingly, it was like a Sprite with a roof. And I remember going to events on the East Coast. We drive over to the East Coast 2+ hours to get there, run events, both of us, anywhere from 3 to 6 runs each, and then drive home, and we'd still be getting over 30 miles per gallon. So
and it was my daily driver.
As Linda in school and me just, starving wages with the county, I just thought it was the greatest way to race ever. So again, there's another car that we had really fond memories of driving that, because it was just so much fun. It was a new car at the time, because we could afford the payment on it. Slog the bejeebers out of it, not have to worry about it breaking or leaking or anything else. So,
did you say you You stuck 12-inch wide wheels on the car?
Not 12 inches wide, 12-inch diameter.
Oh! I'm like, wait, what kind of stock? Okay, so that's like I can relate, a Chevy Turbo Sprint that I might have a couple of. They came with
really
something
tiny.
super small like that.
Yeah, little tiny wheels and tires, 12 by 5-inch wide, I think.
They fit in the back.
I think 5 because we had the sport version instead of the 4.5-inch wheels that came on the standard one. Something like that. I don't remember the details now, but they were 12-inch. I know that because there was the price on 12-inch tires was so amazingly cheap, particularly having been an MGB with 14-inch tires, which these days, of course, even 14-inch tires are tiny, but the cost of the tires from what the MGs cost to what the Datsuns cost was a dramatic drop, and the fact that we could drive it across the state and never worry about getting home and still getting over 30 miles per gallon was quite a revelation for us.
I've got to insert my little fond memory. That first white Type R, maybe it was the second or third Type R after the one got stolen. That car, I cannot believe I sold it still to this day. So if someone's listening and has my car, heard it was in California, I'll buy that back, please. Like you said, you drive across the country and you get 30 miles per gallon. I kept telling myself it never makes sense to get a truck and trailer for this car, ever.
Just remember what I said. You can never go back.
Oh. Well, I could let it just sit. Here's the secret for everybody: Rallycross. Someday I'm really going to try that when I actually look at the schedule. That's my little secret mission there.
Yeah, we love Rallycross. Don't even get us started on that one.
Well, and the other car, I mentioned it earlier, it was sort of the early version of CAM in those days. Even though gate widths were narrower and slalom lengths were, the minimum was 35 feet instead of the 45 today, gate width, I don't even know if there was a minimum in the standard then, but it was not unusual to have a 12-foot wide gate. We're now twice that. We think, okay, that's about the minimum. But there was still a fair number of, muscle cars at the time. I mean, we had a lot of the Barracuda 440s and, the Boss 302 Mustangs and, all sorts of cars like that, as well as C3 Corvettes. And I ended up buying a car from a buddy of mine that was a Nova two-door with a little 307 V8 and a two-barrel and automatic, but he'd autocrossed it a little bit and had done things like, he paid attention to things like wheel width and, rear sway bars and shocks and all that. And wasn't all that fast, but we found that by spending money on the right things, that car oftentimes would be faster than all these other high-powered cars. So I very much enjoyed driving that at the time and running with the V8 guys and showing that 300 plus horsepower wasn't needed necessarily if you could one drive and figure out the right way to get the power down. So a lot of what I see in CAM today is really interesting to me. It sort of harks back to those early days, the 70s, with this range of cars and realizing that power is real impressive at the line, but it isn't necessarily the thing that gets you to the finish line first.
True, and we were running postage stamp type events. They weren't big like we have now, and they weren't wide open. So those big horsepower cars didn't have the ability to get any of that power down.
The other thing,
go ahead.
We were running events at the University of South Florida. That a style of event we called dual watercross, I believe. That was a predecessor to Pro Solo. In fact, it ran, we were running these probably 8 years, I think, 7 or 8 years before Pro Solo came onto the scene. And I don't know if someone ever saw our course designs or whatever, but the first years of Pro Solo, there was a standard course they used. Each course was sort of a horseshoe-shaped thing. We went around the outer perimeter, made a 180, and then you came inside it in some maneuvers, and the course would shrink or stretch depending on the size and shape of the lots. But a lot of us in Florida saw the first brochures and advertisements for Pro Solo, we looked at it and marveled that their course was our standard double autocross course we had run for years and years at USF. And when I had the Nova is when I was first running it, first started running those events. So my link to Pro Solo was pretty natural, given that we've been doing a local version of it far before Pro Solo landed on the national team.
By that time, we had trips. Before that, we were using stopwatches. I'm very happy to be doing that. However, I have to admit, I do like the fancy new equipment now.
Yes, I bet Howard likes it as long as it's flawless, right? And I don't mess up the lights by hitting the wrong button at the wrong time. And
yeah,
true, but he still oohs and ahs when he sees 3x5 cars.
but back to your question about cars, I would say after the Datsun, the Nova, and the MG, the next thing that stands out to me is our chance to run with Dave Welch there for 4 or 5 years in his Formula Ford. It was a Lola T342, I think, and I truly enjoyed that because it was a whole new challenge running something with open wheels, something that was, power to weight was pretty good. It wasn't blazingly fast compared to an A-mod car, but again, we learned how to drive on lower powered cars. So being in a lower powered Formula car, we just put the same tactics to use, and we were able to do pretty well with it. My last nationals that I ran prior to taking the position with SCCA, I think I finished 4th or 5th in a trophy position in A modified, running effectively a warmed over Formula Ford, because again we chose to spend a lot of energy in driving and testing and handling and all those sorts of things rather than worrying about big gorilla motors and all of that. But I always enjoyed that car. And then 2 years ago, we got a chance to go back to Florida in November, and about the same time they were holding the annual Florida State Championship Autocross. It was going to be Central Florida region was hosting it. I'll come back to that in a moment. But I got a chance to drive that same car, in the event, and it was astounding to me that I think we got a chance to do a couple of practice runs the previous day, and within, by the second run, I felt like I had never been out of the car. It was so amazing to me that the feel of the car, the vibrations, the noises, all came rushing back as if I'd just been spending the last 25 years in that car. And again, really enjoyed the ability to toss it around and not have something that street cars are always working around some shortcoming the car has because it's built for something else. It's trying to overcome it, either through your modifications or your driving technique or whatever. But a pure build race car is really something fun to try. I appreciated Dave making the opportunity available to me a couple of years ago to take a shot at it again. So that car and that whole arrangement with Dave will always remain a high spot for me as a driver.
However, I can't tell you that I had as much fun in that car on the 25th anniversary of that event, because the first run I ended up with all 4 wheels in the grass, which got me a DQ and a stern warning from the solo safety steward. And the second run, I only put 2 wheels in the grass. I finally got it on the third, but good Lord, that was a lot of going back.
Yeah, we used to have quite a routine with that car because of the difference in size. Dave's even a little bigger than I am. Of course, Linda's shorter. So trying to get something that all of us could drive and not hold the event up, because, again, I've always been sort of obsessive about the logistics of events. I'm the one that's causing it. I'm trying to shorten it. So, David worked up, pop-in seats for each of us. And in the case of Linda, because by the time the seat got close enough, the steering wheel was real close, and then her elbows would be rubbing the bodywork. So he came up with special bodywork to the upper cowl would be replaced, as well as the seat where her arms could stick out the side of the car while she drove it.
It was ridiculous. And that even happened on this 25th anniversary. And that first run, I made the first corner, the pillow shifted, and not, what happened. I don't even want to get into it.
But Dave was real accommodating to this. He'd offered up the car one year when we were doing a divisional to the Lumen, Davey Lumen and Joyce. We're down in Florida visiting, and we already had, I think, 4 of us in it. He added them in, and we just ran A and B and C modified or something in it. And so it was a real drill getting in and out, changing drivers over, changing numbers, and all these different sizes and classes. But we made it work. We didn't hold up the event, so that's why I've got such a short fuse when I see people dilly-dallying around changing. Because if you can change in a Formula car without holding things up, you surely should be able to do it in a street car with a movable seat.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
We
Oh, go ahead.
We ran some very big events down in Florida, and Howard had always been dreaming up these things that we could play at. My favorite idea of theirs, though, was the night autocross. I have never seen guys in Formula cars trying to hook flashlights to their vehicle so they could see where they were going. Crazy. It's crazy.
There's lots of LED options now. It'd be a lot easier, I bet.
Yeah. It's we had those days. This was pre-safety stewards and safety programs and sanctioning. Well, in fact, a lot of this was even pre-FCCA. But so as long as the school administration would let you get away with it, you could try all sorts of things. But I hadn't thought of the night autocross in quite some time. And those, we even had 2 stages of one with or without the parking lot lights on. We had some that were really totally dark, and decided that may not be the best idea because it's reflective tape being available to any great extent.
You should at least hope for clear skies and a full moon.
Right. Yep.
Wow, the wild and crazy days. So, Linda, you've been driving lots of cars, I think co-driving over the years. What stands out to you as some of the fun that you've been in lately?
Oh, gosh. I love my Miata, without a doubt. And every Miata from the NC, we've got one of each. What can I say? An A and B and C. I'm pushing for an ND. Gosh knows I need one. Those are always fun. But I have to tell you, we've had Corvettes, we've had the Miatas, we've had the Mini Cooper, and the MGs, and a Capri, and you get the idea. My most fun was driving Jeff Jacobs' Mini Cooper. And now I own it, because he just didn't bother getting to selling it, and I couldn't stand it being in his garage that long. So I finally purchased it, and to this day, I still have more fun in that silly car, even on the street, legally. But it's just silly fun. It's a great little car, and it just always makes me smile. I get in it, I can do a roundy round, or a cul-de-sac. What are those? Roundabout.
Yeah.
There we go. And I could do one of those, not even at speed, and it still makes me smile. So it's just a lovely little machine. Oh, I do have to tell you, though, that the FRS that I drive with Malcolm and Judith Lawson out of Venice, Florida, and I have to thank them for a lovely, lovely ride the last 2 years, is an amazing vehicle. It's really awesome. And it's like a Miata with a top. And air conditioning. And that's free for comfort.
Please make me drive a Mini Cooper sometime. I never have, and I heard it was so much easier than the Type R and probably even better performing without having to really run it all the way to Redline all the time.
Well, you have to keep it up there because if the squirrels give up, you're done.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can remember back in the early 2000s when the Mini Cooper was first coming out, and Linda and our son Jeff, they were co-driving his 91 Civic SI in H stock at the time. And I never really much cared for the car. One, I'm not a big front-wheel drive fan, but particularly didn't like that car because it steered so heavy. But at any rate, I got a chance while I was down in Florida at a convention. I'd stopped by a local event in Dixie region, and caught a ride just as a passenger with Ron Foley, who's now on the Rallycross board, but started out in solo for many, many years. He had a little yellow Mini, the regular Cooper, not an S, and took a couple of runs with him. And I remember getting out of the car, immediately getting on the phone and calling Linda and Jeff and saying, "You ought to just pack that Civic up. There's no way that Civic is ever going to be competitive with this car. The chassis is just so much more sophisticated. Power-wise, it's a toss-up probably, maybe even slightly less, but the chassis is so amazing compared to the Civic. It's like you're driving a buckboard and they've got, a Corvette or something in terms of chassis sophistication."
Yeah, I've heard they're amazing. Just that take the Type R, but say, hey, it's even easier and better.
Yeah.
Like there's
something said for the current technology. Engineers have done an awesome job on these new cars. Careful what you pick.
Yeah, since I'm finally co-driving quite a bit this year, it's kind of odd. I'm like, my Civic's sitting there a little down on power this year, and I'm like, wow, that really does matter. You mentioned about the high horsepower cars not necessarily being faster. I realize when you have a little squirrel in your car and it can't do the top end, you really can't be so competitive.
True, but that driving skill is huge.
Oh yeah,
huge.
That's what I don't.
I mean, look what Street does to some of the prepared cars. They were outperforming down in Blytheville this weekend, and I was just in awe. Those guys were amazing.
Which cars? Which ones?
The C Street guys. I watched them to gauge myself to what I'm doing, and I was just amazed at how those times were real close to some of those guys in the prepared classes, and especially the R2 class I was watching.
Oh yeah, that's where you guys can tell us about the tire changes over the years. But I'm just so impressed with like the Bridgestone Arrival S compared to when I was running the Hoosiers, like the SO3s. It's just amazing now.
Yep.
They are. When they first came out, I was expecting them to slide a little more because my first national championship is on street tires. It says TSL, and second one for that matter. And so you always got that little bit of slide, but these tires you can truly trust.
Yeah, I've been.
The evolution of tires over a period of time that I've been doing this is, I hadn't thought of that till you asked the question. My mind quickly did a rewind and think the tires that were on my MGB when I first got it, the guy called them racing recaps. And there was a guy in town in Tampa that was taking, and in the case of an MG, we needed a small size relative to Mustangs and other cars. And this guy had some supply of, this really dates me, D70, back before we even used the metric stuff. We used D ratings. He had these 14-inch D Firestone wide ovals. And then he put this effectively like a street tread racing recap. It was kind of the compound they might use on an oval track, asphalt track. And that's what I had as street tires. And because they were recaps, everybody else said that's okay. And so that's kind of what I started with. So, but they were quickly, in many ways replaced by even the Michelin radial, the XCXs, those sorts of things. Then on to the Beardsteins and the Phoenixes, and then Yokohama and DFG as they came online. And so the current street tires, part of what I've found interesting about those, starting several years ago, versus Bridgestone and a whole bunch of others, is that in many ways they were very similar to what we were used to in the 80s with the Yokohama 1Rs, for instance, where in Florida, especially where I don't have to worry about winter weather, that I could keep them on my CRX all year round, rain, shine. Just that's what the only set of tires I had was the Yokohama 1Rs on there, and then we sort of rediscovered the Bridgestones and some of the Hankers and some of those others that you could leave them on and actually get in the car and drive them the distance. Is what intrigued me about those tires. In fact, my first trip to Denver, when I first took over doing Pro Solo, they asked me to come out in December to plan the following year. This was in '88, I think. And I decided, well, rather than fly or get a rental car, I guess I didn't even think about a rental car. I decided I'll drive my CRX out, and I was on BF Goodrich R compound tires that were my daily drivers, and I drove it to Denver in December on R compound tires, never even thinking about snow, because that just didn't cross my mind as a Floridian.
Those white things.
And when I got out to Denver, they had a light dusting on one day, and the car couldn't even get out of the driveway of the people I was staying in. I quickly learned that was a really stupid idea.
I realized that bringing an S2000 up here on like Texas all season tires on the crown of the road, I just kind of end up on the side of the road and I couldn't get back up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But in Denver, all we had to do was put Blizzaks on our car, especially living in the mountains. We had a crazy driveway straight down to the house. And all we ever did on the Hondas was put regular Blizzaks on them and just go. It was so fun. And I'd be following behind trucks and just what we call POR, pressing on regardless. And the buses would make the path, and I'd just follow them in my little Honda and be so happy.
Yeah, that's the thing. People don't get it. And I had I guess I had an all-wheel drive Audi. I raced way back at the beginning of autocross, and then a Mitsubishi Evo. Once I put the snow tires on those cars, they were night and day better in the snow. Just way better.
Yep. Yeah. And Linda had to step out for a moment. We're at a rest area.
Nice and quiet.
She'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Oh, cool. So tell us from your perspective, how can us autocrossers help you? Do we need to pay more attention to the SCB, give more input, less input? What would you like from us?
Well, I think one, to stay on top of what's being proposed, and to keep in mind that there's a rule season, that if you have an idea or a thought, you can't wait until October to spring it on the SEB, because they typically have a support structure of committees for whether it's a safety issue or a street prepared issue or whatever it is. They have committees that are set up as subject matter experts more than they are. I mean, we got SEB members across the whole range of parts of the sport, so not everybody can be an expert in everything. So it's a matter of keeping in mind that if you really want a rules change for the following year, you really got to be thinking about it and get it to them in the springtime rather than in the fall, because at that point, unless this is a dramatic safety oversight or clarification because we misspelled something, those kind of changes are just not going to happen at the end, because it's unfair to spring things on the rest of the members. It may be a very good idea, but everybody has built their cars or purchased their cars or made their decision about things, parts and cars, based on there being some continuity and expectation, and it's unfair to expect they get an idea in October. They're going to think about it, act on it, send it to the board of directors. The board of directors agrees in December, and then come January, out of nowhere, there's this change in classification, or all of a sudden you can put a supercharger on Civics or whatever it might be.
Nice.
I thought you'd appreciate that one. So the first is to be aware that because we're trying to do this as democratically as possible, where everybody's got a chance for input, that the process just by its nature is going to be a little slower and longer than maybe something in Pro Solo, where if I get an idea coming out of the finale, I go, oh, that's pretty good. Let me think about it. We beat it around between the field staff folks and some members of the community, and we may implement it, within a couple of months. But in regular solo, because it's so broad. It's it's a bigger sport than just the 300 or 400 that run pro solos. That it needs a broader chance for input. So it's a matter of keeping track and really paying attention to what's being published in Fast Track online or wherever, and for folks to understand that just because an idea is being floated out there, they really are, and many times they try to put the language such, but a lot of times this gets overlooked, is the SED is not necessarily sold on an idea just because they put it out for member comment. They really want member comment because they're just not sure. They don't know whether this is a totally harebrained idea.
Okay, so Howard, sorry, that cut you off right when you were saying, I believe you're getting at that we really need to support the SEB, especially if we're for something, because most people don't chime in.
Right, yeah. Usually it's only those that are against something that speak up, so sometimes it's hard for the SEB to gauge whether an idea is good or bad if they're only getting one side of the story or the side of the opinion. So I always urge folks to not assume just because it's out for proposal that it's a done deal, either whether they're for or against, because oftentimes they really are just floating it for member input because they don't have any strong feelings about it one way or the other, but they don't want to waste time waiting for feelings to develop and then lose the chance for it to be a possible rule change for the following year. So they really are sort of shotgunning it in the earliest stages of the year to see what resonates with membership.
And another thought I had, do you want or do you expect to see growth in both pro solo and solo? Is that something like, do you have thoughts on, we want to grow things, we want to have more solo 2 or the faster solo, more pro solo events?
Well, over the last couple of years, we've seen steady growth in the average attendance of events within the series. I mean, there's individual events that oftentimes struggle, but the average attendance for the years has grown steadily over the last 2 or 3 years. Now, part of that is undoubtedly, economic situation. We can't, when we have a downturn in attendance, we can't blame economics and then turn around and when the attendance starts to improve, say, oh, it's all us.
Oh, yeah, lots of variables.
Yeah, things that play there, but we have obviously, and it's sort of self-evident when we have find location sites that are desirable, is a heavy contributor to attendance. Specifically, Wilmington, Ohio. All of those events that we have been having there the last couple of years, almost sells out in record time. Same with Toledo. Again, both Toledo's reasonably big, Wilmington undoubtedly big, but both really smooth, nice concrete. And so as a result, and the fact where they're located, there's a reasonably high density of autocrossers within a 300-400 mile range of either of those sites. But oftentimes the site is part of what drives it, but oftentimes it's as much the region and the heritage of the event. And I'll give an example. We haven't run this event now in, I want to say maybe it's 20 years, but for the first 5 or 6 years of the tour program in the early 90s, our biggest event was at Evansville, Indiana, over 4th of July weekend. And our history of running anywhere but that part of the world, 4th of July, has been less than successful because a lot of folks say, no, that's family holiday time. I don't want to be running autocross then. But in those days, the Southern Indiana region folks had linked their event with the big festival in the city at that time, the Freedom Festival, and the autocross was part of that. And at first it was a divisional event, and then when the national tour came along, they wanted to be part of that. And so it was really a case of there was a sports car meet tied with the 4th of July, and oh, by the way, an autocross broke out because it was probably in that era one of our worst locations as far as the courses and the site and all of that was concerned. It was not a particularly big lot. It had some weird elevation changes, and it wasn't particularly grippy. But the whole environment of being 4th of July weekend, of the hospitality of the region, the party they put on Saturday night was outstanding, with door prizes they've been able to secure from people from all parts of the sport. Just the whole setting, everything was great about it. So again, we called it a sports car party that an autocross breaks out in, and every year it was our largest attended national solo or national tour event. And I was always scratching my head initially, going, this just doesn't make any sense to me, having come from Florida, where we had a riches of sites. Those were the places you put big events on. You didn't put big events on some of your worst sites. But it showed, it was a object lesson for me that there's more to it than just the site. A lot of it is, if you get a lot of people there, then the competition is important, because you got all the best people there, and while the site may not be the best, you're all dealing with the same situation. And then the whole environment that surrounds it, because obviously if we tried to justify our involvement in this, particularly at the national level, it really does not follow any kind of logic that you're going to drive hundreds, maybe 1,000 miles for 6 minutes worth of activity and then drive another 500 to 1,000 miles home. So there has to be something more to it than that to make it worthwhile. And that Evansville event was, I've always kept in the back of my mind as the model. And if you can blend both the social and the fun and a great site and great course together, then you've got a winning recipe, which is luckily what we've got in Wilmington right now, with the national tour pulling it had 370, 365, something like that. We could have actually had more than that, but we were a little hesitant as to how long it'd run, because that site happens to have a curfew at the end of the day because of being an airport. But and then the Pro Solo we ran 2 weeks ago, we had 280 at that event. I think the biggest regular season Pro Solo in the history of the program. So it's a variety of things that are at work there that help drive the attendance.
Yeah, because you like you said, for 6 minutes of racing, a lot of us drive across the country. And it made me think, what is the personality test if you tested us? Like, why are we so nutty to do something like that? It just, you can't equate. But like you said, you get the right mix of everything. That reminded me, when we were at DIA, I think we had like 300 people in an event at times here locally showing up, and maybe some at Coors Field as well.
You're right. Yep.
That leads me to wondering, do you think it ever makes sense for a club or a person or a group to build a dedicated pad?
I don't know if the economics are there to support it. Obviously, from the standpoint of the long-term health of the program, being able to have control of your facility either through long-term lease or agreements or owning it is, I suspect, is going to be a critical element to the sport sustaining itself, because there are very few new sites being created, because those facilities that might have been sites that were paved, say 20 years ago, that might be going through their life cycle now. We went through that period of beautification of parking lots with islands, curbs, trees, and all that other stuff, which is fine from an architectural standpoint, but obviously from our perspective is just an abomination. But whether it's economically feasible for a region or a club to do that, or even SCCA as a whole, is questionable, just because a combination of property values, the expense of paving, all those sorts of things. I know the San Francisco region is one of the largest, if not the largest region in the country, is looking at some things now with one of their sites, trying to get a long-term lease, and part of that is they've been putting socket money away for 30 years, I think, on trying to have enough money to buy and build a site. And they may come to the conclusion that improving an existing site and then getting a long-term lease may be the way to do it. So haven't yet heard how that's going to fully play out, but it's looking encouraging at the moment. But again, I've always said that the two biggest factors for the continuation of the sport are the threats to it, I guess you should say, are its safety and sites. We argue and spend a lot of energy on a variety of things that are effectively the weight of lug nuts or Sprite valve sizes, we used to say in the old days. But none of those things particularly go right to the heart of the continuation of the sport. They're kind of second or third tier concerns as opposed to the ability to actually put events on, either because of risk management issues or insurance or the physical layouts we have available to us.
Yeah, and I like your thought there of throwing out an idea I didn't think of, that maybe you improve a site with some money and get that long-term lease. Something that bugs the heck out of me but is an opportunity, I think. When I fly in and out of Denver, I look over at where we used to race, and usually there's 20% of it with cars. So my thought was, yeah, we don't have access to it, but if we could somehow get the contract to be the parking company, maybe make some money, but also organize the cars, maybe you could also then get a right to be able to use that for an event. Like maybe parking lots around airports for the overflow seasons, they would be used, but otherwise they're sitting there kind of empty.
Right. Yeah, I remember the lots we used there, after, what was that, 5-6 years? Well, I say 5-6 years, but after being with the club for 25 years as an employee, I have a hard time putting a point in time where things happen sometimes. But yeah, and I know they went through various discussions with the parking company out there. First, you had an advocate with DIA. I can't remember her name now off the top of my head, but who was helpful with that. And then when they really turned it over to a private enterprise, at first they had some luck with that, and then finally they just said, no, this just isn't even worth thinking about, because from their standpoint, whatever it is we could afford to pay was pocket change effectively. And usually, if they ever ran the question by their lawyers, they always said, oh, no, you should never get involved in that, despite the fact that we have the gold standard of insurance in the industry on this issue. But still, they have to be interested. So that one's been a little frustrating. I haven't flown into Denver much, but back a few months ago, I happened to have a layover there. As I was coming in, I glanced down at that and said, oh, dang, they're still not using that lot.
Nope.
Which seems like a, from our standpoint, a waste of a resource.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's one of the reasons why I tend to hang on maybe longer than is, from a business standpoint, would seem wise on the short term. Places like Blytheville, it's 3 hours even for locals to get there. So it's kind of in the middle of nowhere from that standpoint, but it's such a good facility. I don't want to lose the connection to the town and the people that run the site. So we're kind of down to just using it once a year right now. At one point we were using it 3 and 4 times a year, but I have a hard time justifying multiple events that are sort of undersubscribed. But keep looking for that how we can magically make it better. But unfortunately, the sites and where people are don't always line up real well.
Yeah, how many acres would like a minimum be for the national folks to pay attention? If you had 6 or 10 acres of concrete out here around Denver, would that be enough?
I always have to stop and convert acres into actual dimensions.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, because if it's square versus rectangle versus.
Yeah, I mean, when we send out our contracts, I think we say something along the lines of and these really are minimums that, and it didn't have to be in this shape, but it's easy to describe this way, that for a tour, it should be 400 by 1,000 in course area and pro. It should be wider than that, so more like 500 feet wide. So Blytheville is 400. We make it work, but again, in that 1,000, by 400 or 500 wide is sort of the minimum to really consider it a national standard facility. Now that's again going back to my example, Evansville. If we would have never happened under those conditions. To be that big, we would have had to take in the parking area as well to reach that kind of number. But so it can be done with less, but in terms of what everybody expects now as a standard, is more in that range. And again, that's kind of a minimum. To give you a ballpark idea, each side at Lincoln for each east and west is about, I want to say, rough. I mean, it's not exactly square, but like 900 by 900 each side. So something in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and it's so funny that sometimes one of the pros out there, was this spring Nats. You could fit it all on one side only. It was like, hey, a miniature version.
Right, yeah, that's what we tried to do this last year. As we were experimenting with something, and everybody said, "Why can we run such a small course?" And I said, "Well, time-wise, it's really not that much different. It's just you're used to going all the way over to the fence line."
Yeah.
And so for the finale, we're having to we're kind of doing a compromise between those. We'll still start dead center, but we're running the Cam Invitational. What's happening concurrently over on a portion of the East course and the East grid area, so that we're not trying to shoehorn them into the Pro Solo, which was a nightmare last year, having a 300-plus car event, adding another 35 Cam cars who don't know what they're doing on top of that was stressful, to say the least, from a logistics standpoint.
Okay, so 2 different ones. That's cool. And are people invited, or can anybody show up for Cam?
That's an invitational thing, and Raleigh and Bella Marine are heading that up. They're basically, it's the first folks that are invited or sort of guaranteed a slot are those that have done well at the previous Cam Challenge events earlier in the year, and there were 3 of those this year. Third one's happening, this weekend actually, in Indiana. One in Texas, California, and then Indiana, and then folks who have also done well in the Good Guys, because we have a promotional arrangement with them. And then beyond that, it's invitational of looking for people of note within that community and our own community that happen to have those same kind of cars. And we've got a number of folks that are not going to be running the finale because either they don't have enough points, they didn't run enough events, or this was an off year for them. But they're going to run even though they haven't, run any of our channels. Building burned down. Yeah. Just passing that auction in Hayes, Kansas, we always look at their dirt lot out there because it looks like a rallycross site, and just realized that their auction house building has mostly burned to the ground. Anyway, so folks like Mike Johnson, for instance, and his wife Candy have not been running Pro Solos this year. They've been doing some Good Guys and Ultimate Streetcar and that kind of thing. And so they were invited as past champions and people are now involved in that community. So I think Raleigh's up. They're going to put a cap at about 70 entries. He's sitting at about 60 right now. And I think he's got several queued up to hit that 70 mark pretty easily.
Nice. Okay, so they can grow that number because they have a totally separate course that wouldn't never slow down anything with a normal Pro Solo.
Right. Yeah, and so we're seeing how that, and we kept it at 70. So okay, let's see how this works, because they wanted to play with a couple of format ideas and make sure they gave full value to this. So, but again, we needed to get it outside of Pro Solo just because it was just logistically a hair puller last year, trying to run the biggest Pro Solo we'd ever had, and then by the way, let's throw another 30 on top of that and do a challenge as well.
Yeah,
So,
no kidding. Does this help you with some of the thoughts I think I've heard about having a pro series or a pro classes versus others in pro solo?
Yeah, we've been kicking this around. Well, I mean, I've thought about this for probably 20 years, but in the last 2 or 3 years, it's come more into the forefront. And I call it basically the pro solo adopting the NHRA model of drag racing. When they do the Mile High Nationals, out there at, oh gosh, what's the name of the drag strip?
Vandermeer. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been gone for just a few years, and all of a sudden I'm losing memory of Denver stuff. We went and studied that a number of years ago, just before we left Denver. We got some VIP tickets somehow and went out, and I was watching how that all operated and what can we steal from this, and what might work, and sort of put that stuff planted away in the back of my mind. And but under the NHRA model, like Mile High, is that the ones that get on TV and the ones that get all the press and notoriety are their 3 pro classes. The funny cars, pro stock, and fuel, and occasionally motorcycles. I guess that's sort of something goes. And then they've got this whole range of what they refer to as their sportsman category, and those are all the guys in Chevelles, GTOs, Mustangs, Camaros, and all the other stuff in this wide range of classes. And in fact, if anyone thinks SCCA has too many solo classes, they need to go look at NHRA's classes. we are pikers compared to them in terms of creating classes, but it's successful for them. So in one of these events, I know the one in Heartland, for instance, there might be 400 or 500 cars or drivers on site for that big nationals weekend, but only about 45 to 50 of them are actually in the ones that most casual observers would ever be aware of. In other words, the pro category, and all the other 400 are the guys running in the sportsman category. So we've looked at that as maybe we could carry that model over into pro solo, where we could make the whole range of regular solo classes available in pro solo. I mean, we do have them in one fashion or another, whether they're indexed or not. And then sort of slice off and allow for some greater marketing potential, media attention by focusing on 3 or 4 key classes that would possibly be alluring to the top folks in the sport that have the time, the commitment, the resources, whatever, to more follow the series and run either more events or run at a higher level, and pick 3 classes that are concepts of classes that are exciting to watch or visually interesting or would be promotable and have some market interest. In other words, using Linda's example of her Mini a little while ago, I don't think we'd ever make a pro class the equivalent of H Street Minis and Ford Fiestas. I don't think that just doesn't meet the standard in any of the criteria I just gave. But Street Mod might, or ESP, or STX, something like that. We wouldn't call them that. There's different names for those classes. But that's the general concept. However, to make that work, not only do I have to create the classes, and that's actually, anyway, the easy part, is then the effort that would have to be concentrated in promoting this, marketing it, changing the presentation of the sport a little bit more to where it's more pro than it's been. Up to now, we haven't necessarily been trying to make it more pro, if you will. From a presentation standpoint, it's all been about how can we increase the numbers, how can we make more folks interested in us, how can it be more self-sustaining, financially by having bigger attendance, being sure we got team competition, all those sorts of, operational kind of things. But how can we actually fulfill what its original purpose was, which was to be a marketing tool, if you will, both for SCCA and in general for the sport of autocross, and as a commercial venture for SCCA to be a profit center that helps keep costs in check in other areas by having a profit center. But there's a lot of moving pieces there, and to be able to do this, because the classes is the easy part. It's getting the commitment within the club that yes, we're going to put some of our promotional efforts towards this, get it on the proposals that go out to sponsors and agency providers and all of that, put it on the front burner rather than just part of the bigger packages, all of the things we send out each year. So it had to find its way onto the priority list. That's part of, frankly, what we've been doing over the last 6-8 months, working on a club strategic plan with the board of directors and the staff, and what and so next creating a priority list of what's going to come first and what are we going to work on the hardest first, and what are we going to put our resources towards, and first, second, and third. And so where Pro Solo Pro fits into that at the moment is still a bit of a question mark, because we're sort of just first third of that process right now.
So is the key, if I understand this correctly, to be a profit center, you need to be able to attract more money from sponsors?
Yeah, to make this viable, to really call it pro, we want to have a real cash purse. There's obviously a cash purse now, but it's pretty nominal compared to back 20 years ago when we had, 20 plus years ago now, when Valvoline was our title sponsor. And we were, over the course of the year, prize money either at the event or the finale. And this doesn't even count contingency money, just prize money that we were paying out. My memory of it is that our prize fund was like $60,000 for the year. And we didn't have as many classes as we've got now. So there were significantly higher cash purses for winning a challenge or winning a class or whatever it may be. We took a big chunk of the money from Valvoline and turned it right back into cash prizes for the participants to help drive interest and drive really super dedicated, serious autocrossers to the sport. Then when Valvoline went away in '96, then we had to totally re-gear and think of it as effectively. We used to joke and say when Valvoline went away, then Pro Solo became a tour with a funky start. And that's really kind of how we've had to operate it. We've been able to maintain a nominal cash part of it, but to be honest, it really is. We've just been trying to work on the operational side of it. So when all the parts and pieces were in play, and new Valvoline type sponsor could be found, we'd be ready to go. And I think I'm reasonably comfortable to say by the time we get through the finale, we will have ironed out almost all the issues by the fact that we were able to run 280 cars at Wilmington, and by 6 o'clock on Saturday, I was sitting in the restaurant having dinner. I think that tells me we got the operation down pretty good at this point.
Yeah. So you're saying the profit center really comes back to having more cash to pay out to the participants, not the SCCA trying to make profit off the event?
I don't view those as mutually exclusive. Obviously, we want to use it. The SCCA bought Pro Solo from the original owners because we said, okay, this is one in '86 when they did this, late '85, that this would be a profit center for the solo program. Up to that point, all solo programs are viewed as, at the end of the year, you can make $1. Okay, that's fine because it's the entry point for the SCCA. But Pro Solo was specifically bought with the idea that we could be such a focused, different program. We could bring marketing partners to bear to provide not only cash prizes to the participants to encourage their participation, but to help drive income to SCCA, which would then mitigate the need to raise other fees within the club because we're getting income from other sources than membership dues or entry fees or whatever else, sanction fees, that kind of stuff. So it's really both. I mean, any big sponsor that can, and with the expectation for me would be if we're going to do this pro thing, we need to be sure the money kind of gets divvied up. One, improving the actual presentation and look and feel of the event. Two, increasing the cash purse so that there's more incentive to run. And then third, as part of the business side of it, that there has to be some money left over that when all is said and done at the end of the year, I can point to Pro Solo and say it made X $1,000 this year, and therefore there's X thousand we don't have to try to derive from other sources.
Okay. One thing you joked about the Mini and the Fist, I think. I would maybe see some of those people that make those cars. If you had a series where one of the pro classes was Mini Coopers versus Miatas, maybe they'd throw in cash or throw in a car at the end of the year or something.
Yeah, the manufacturers have been kind of funny about this in a way, funny in the sense that oftentimes when we've suggested something to manufacturers, one sort of stock answer is, oh, we don't want to beat ourselves, we want to beat other people. And then other times they like the idea of a spec class, like a spec Miata or something like that, because then they view it as, oh, well, then everybody on track is in a Miata or in a Neon or whatever it might be. And then we get that, that visual of all those neons going at it. And we get that, that deep, consumer loyalty to the brand. And so it's always a matter of trying to match what it is we would like to accomplish with what they view as their marketing and company needs. And it always seems to be an ever-changing objective on their side. A combination of business, changes and environments change, but also ad agencies change and people in charge of the marketing dollars changes, and so therefore that changes the priorities, what folks think are important, what they think is not so important. But we have not. One of the things we've been discussing lately is the possibility of, while I had said, not a, we'd want, more visually stimulating, vehicles to be part of this program. We have not totally tossed out the idea of something like the global MX-5 Cup phenomenon, or Spec Miata, or up in Canada they used to have a Spec Honda. They had a Spec Suzuki class at one point in Raleigh.
There you go.
But something like that's a easily accessible point for someone to quote GoPro, and that's been part of what's successful in World Challenge, for instance. They tend to think of the Corvettes, the Vipers, and Porsches, but there's also B-Spec and Touring C, and I haven't got it totally memorized in my head, but there's a couple of classes that are significantly more accessible to the average road racer than the cars that are running in the two top categories, that are $100,000 cars before you even spend any money on them to make them race-worthy.
Well, let's face it, too, when we go to the runoffs, some of the most fun racing is watching the spec class, because we know that's driver's skill at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's right. And this kind of ties into my mind with all the street tire classes now, and just it seems like all the growth, it's like a no-brainer. Now, yes, we have all these different tires to choose from, and we hope we can get them. But oh my goodness, I mean, I would think that has to have helped the sport as well. That we have cheaper tires that you can run on for a season almost.
Yeah, that was kind of a painful couple of years when that was first suggested, and I got to give the SCB credit for sticking with it, and the BOD for sticking with the SCB on that, because it would have been really easy in that first month of that proposal to just fall back into our comfort zone and say, okay, let's just leave well enough alone. But it really has been a boon to the. Back to your question about growth of the sport, I honestly do think the street tire thing has been one of those elements, and it's sort of, I mentioned economic conditions. Well, this is sort of our internal economic situation, and exactly what you mentioned about the single set of tires. We were just talking earlier, by the way, we're starting early stages of working on some proposals to increase the number of women involved in solo, because our actual average percentage of participants that are women has actually dropped a bit over the last 10 years, even though we got more women, but the sport has grown, but that percentage hasn't kind of kept up. So anyway, in the course of talking about that, we said, okay, one of the things that's a boon to the possibility of making the sport more accessible to, women that are, single women or people that are on their own is, in fact, the street tires, because they could literally have, short of living, in northern climates, but anywhere else, you could have a BRZ or a Miata or whatever on the street tires and use those as legitimate daily driver tires, just like I did years ago with my CRX, and eliminate all of the the hassles of having a quote prepared type car that were in play a few years ago, or even in stock. You definitely weren't driving around in your R compound tires. So changing tires was part of the whole routine, and therefore not as making the sport as accessible as it could be, particularly to the casual competitor.
Yeah, I did drive out on one Hoosier when I had a flat tire right outside of Denver. It's okay in the rear of an Integra.
Yeah.
Yeah, the street tires, I just remember the last time I took the Integra to the finale and nationals, I had 14 tires in my car because basically I wanted new fronts every single day. And I was like, no matter what, I'm done. It doesn't matter if I win or not, I'm done with this car on R comps. No more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hard lesson.
It's like, oh, it's so great with brand new tires. Then 12 runs later, okay, I want new tires again.
Well, the whole debate about the street tires versus R tires and all of that, one of the many little tipping points, I think, along the way in that discussion or involvement of that topic came, I don't know, was it 3 or 4 years ago when Matthew Braun was running that Lotus, I think.
Yep, the blue one.
And he came on the last day, I think he had a fresh set of tires for every run. Every run was a brand new set of scuffed-in tires.
Yeah.
And everybody looked at that and said, my God, is that what this has come to?
Oh, I thought those Hoosiers, when I was last racing on them, I didn't even scrub them in. I thought they were magic, some of those first runs. I just was like, wow, it doesn't get any better than this ever.
Yeah.
How many participants are in solo per SCCAs, I guess? How do y'all track that?
Well, we've had some difficulty getting information from regions. It's been like pulling teeth getting basic, what I think of as just basic business information, much like McDonald's knows how many cheeseburgers they've sold or whatever. So we've had to do it through a sort of an extrapolation formula that Raleigh and Velma Barine, as the region solo managers, development managers, did with the new SPCs, which used to be the divisional stewards. They got within each of their regions, the regions within their divisions, and got results and kind of went through the manual way. And from there, and they weren't able to get full results because, as you know, not all regions have their websites up to date with all of the end results in there. But we came away pretty comfortable with saying that there are 22 to 25,000 unique SCCA members that autocross on with some level of regularity, meaning 2 events or more. which was a whole new number. We never had that before. The only number we've ever had was based on when someone joins. They have a little box they can check off. What are you interested in? Club racing, solo, road rally, whatever it might be. And the monies from membership and other general sources were allocated and sent, charged back to the department based on those checkoffs. But that was a very imprecise method, particularly for new members who are excited about everything. Someone new to solo, and you let them know that there's club racing and there's pro rally. In the day, there was pro rally, and their habit was to go through and check all the boxes because it all sounded cool, and that was fine. But from a budgeting standpoint, that meant that membership dollar got segregated, 6 or 7 different ways. And then when we did the total tallying, we always looked at it and said, in the past, of SCCA members, solo made up somewhere between 15 and 19% of the membership, and club racing made up over 50%. And now with these new numbers and the way they're tracking licenses, sanctions on road racing side, we can now really say, solo is basically equal with club racing, if not a little bigger. And then, of course, there's rallycross and road rally and time trials and some of the other things, are some of the more single-digit, if you will, percentages. But anyway, to answer your question, the last number we used coming out of the convention earlier this year was somewhere between 22 and 25,000 unique people within SCCA are autocrossing 2 or more times a year.
Nice. Okay. I thought in the back of my head I heard 60,000. Maybe that's a number closer to total membership.
What was the number?
I thought it was 60,000 stuck in my head from maybe when you were in Denver a couple years ago.
60,000 is the number that we're using these days for our total membership, and that takes regular members and the reoccurring weekend members, because we have quite a number of folks who just keep buying weekend memberships over and over again. So we finally decided, well, let's count them too, because they're just choosing to buy their membership on the payment plan rather than all at once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, people like to pay monthly. Everybody's gone to the SaaS model.
Yeah. So at any rate, 60,000 is that number. Now, one other number you may have heard of, which was the PRI, the people who put the trade show on, Performance Racing Industries. They had a magazine, or still have, I guess. They did some calculations a number of years ago, trying to determine the size of the motorsports market, how many people are in drag racing, how many are in roundy round, how many are in motorcycles, et cetera, et cetera. One of them, they actually did a feature article about autocrossing as to how large it was, and this was going back quite a few years now, that the number of people that were regular, that autocrossed with some regularity, was something north of 100,000. I want to say 110, 115,000. Now, of course, that took in SCCA, local clubs, art clubs, all of that. But we know that SCCA is the gorilla in that group relative to how many people and how many events we do and how many people come through the turnstile, so to speak. And we know, the one number we do know within SCCA, because this is the one thing that we can track, is that how many folks, how many sanction fees have been paid through the course of the year. And right now we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 75,000 people that regions have submitted audit forms with paid sanction fees for about 75,000 entries. Now, one could joke and say, okay, is that one guy entering 75,000 times, or is it 75,000 people entering once? We know it's obviously not either end of that bell curve, but so we we've always been struggling to figure out, what the real population of unique people is. That's why this latest one of 22 to 25 is as close as we've been able to come so far.
And that makes me realize the number of people that have autocrossed. Like I met somebody this year that hadn't been racing in 15 years. And he's like, oh, yeah, John Ames was here when I last autocrossed 15 years ago. So that means there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that at some point have autocrossed.
Right.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are the right people to talk to even think about this stuff. I had heard that 60,000 number and didn't remember what exactly that was. Like, was it autocrossers or something else? So, interesting.
Yeah, lots of different numbers floating around, so it's hard to remember which one is which.
Yeah, and I just took notes, so I'll probably put that in the show notes for the show. So I'm like, I can go back and just look at that. Size of lot. If you want to build a lot, do this.
We went through this a number of years ago when Roger Johnson, not the course designer Roger, but the Ohio Roger Johnson, was our MC and involved in our Hall of Fame project at the National Convention. He was the MC, and he was, as his lead into the description, he said, over the years, how many people have been SCCA members, much like how many people have been autocrossers? And, when our average has been this many per year, but that's a turnover rate of this. And so maybe there's been, 750,000 people or whatever the number was he had. It was really a big number. And then what he was trying to indicate was, and now we're talking about 5 people out of that 750,000 that are going to be selected for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
That tells you how far up on the tippy point of the sphere, these folks are. When you think about all of the memberships in behind those people.
Yeah, especially compared to, let's say, NFL football players. There's not been probably 750,000 football players.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, so once again, you have to in this sport, you probably have to stick around quite a long time, and you're still not even close to the tippy point.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember being at a Rocky Mountain Division meeting just before we left Denver. It was one of the last ones I went to. It might have even been that fall of 2002, and I was in the room, and I was, feeling pretty good that I'd been a member at that point for 20 years, I guess. Because I'd became an official SCCA member in '81 to go to a driver's school. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I've been around a long time. And then they started doing an introductory. Everybody was sort of introducing themselves in the room. And all of a sudden I'm getting, all these people that, until they got to me, the lowest one had been like 30 years, 35 years, 32 years, 42 years. And I get up and say, well, I'm really kind of embarrassed, but I've only been here for 20 years. They were all a little shocked because they figured I was their contemporary, but I just hadn't joined as early as they did.
Yeah. That reminds me, I just got a letter, a week or two ago, saying I can get a year 15 pin or something. Otherwise, I always guess, I'm like, I think I started in 2001. So, yeah, that's neat that they, at least, I may never send a letter back, but at least they sent me a letter so I know how long I've been in.
Right.
I filed mine at 35 years. I thought about framing it. But here's one for you, Kent. Jeffrey, when he turned 25 or 26, he received his 25-year pin.
Oh, so I should have bought my kids in to begin with. I see.
That is absolutely correct.
I'm a slacker. Everybody knows that. I did not think to do that.
Yeah, we have some I believe Lisa Noble bought her grandson a lifetime membership. And I smiled. I said, okay, she went up to me.
Yeah, there you go. See, you could convince me maybe if I could just buy them lifetime memberships and hope they actually stick around. It's a good deal.
Yeah, actually, I was talking to an FSAE kid out of University of Kansas, or KU like we call it. And I said, Nick, how come you haven't joined SCCA? He said, oh, my dad bought me a lifetime membership when I graduated from college. So, I mean, they're out there. We love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and is that some part of the program? Do you guys, I mean, I wish when I was at Texas A&M, the first college I went to, I wish I would have known that they autocrossed. Is that, if you want more growth, would that be something to get to some gearheads?
Yeah, and that's been over the last, about 12 years now. I've been an advocate for the Formula SAE program because I went to their big championship event in the Detroit area back in 2003 or 4, something like that, and realized that there were colleges all over the country building these little Formula cars. And in some cases, I came to learn that the local regions had partnered with the college to, one, provide them some help and guidance and as mentors in the racing world, to know what a Heim joint is or some of those kinds of things, or racecraft, I guess. Not necessarily engineering, but kind of racecraft things. And the flip side is that the team could then serve as the host to get the region onto the college campus to use a parking lot, because otherwise, as the XYZ Sports Car Club coming to Ohio State, they could spend a lifetime working their way through the bureaucracy, trying to figure out how someone's ultimately going to say no to them, that they can't use it. But by being partnered with the Ohio State Formula SAE team, the OVR, Ohio Valley region, had access to some wonderful lots there for quite a few years, maybe still do. I haven't kept up with whether they're still doing it or not, but basically the region, rather than paying a lot fee, would pay a donation to the team, which then they would use to buy tires or pay for the travel expenses to get to the team to the Detroit Big Show, or the one they now do in Lincoln as well. So I've been trying to advocate within the office that this is a good deal for us to use as a region development tool, for that connection, as well as on a membership level, because all of these kids that go through these programs are like they're in training to become officials with the SCCA, because the teams are very much a collaborative effort, and it's team building and all of this. So they come out of this doing the sorts of things that leadership people in a region already do. So hopefully they come out as, if they come out as car nuts and want to become involved, SCCA is their logical place to go, and they're already attuned to the ideas of what it would take to be not just a paying member, but an engaged member, an involved member. But on the front side, this opens the opportunity for SCCA to get a foothold in a university and put the sport right in front of other students inside the SAE one. But for whatever reason, I haven't been. We continue to support it. We have a team out there at both events providing timing and scoring and other functions for them. But I have yet to get full commitment and buy-in to this as a real tool for us. But I keep plugging away at it. See if maybe what you just suggested, maybe that's, I need to play that angle up more than I have in the past.
Well, and Brandon Howard and I have a real passion for Formula SAE as well as street survival, but Formula SAE allows SCCA members to share the knowledge they've gained through the years of racing with these kids, because at their competition, which is the most beautiful performance assessment I have ever seen in my educator years, they have roughly 300 to 500 points they earn in these static events, and these cars have to perform, and if kids can't drive the cars, then they can't show that the car is performing at an optimum level. And that's where SCCA members come in. They can work alongside these kids at their specific colleges, which then gets their foot in the door at the colleges to possibly run at some of their sites. It's a beautiful working relationship if we can ever get enough people to know that this possibility, this opportunity is out there for them.
And I realized when Howard was talking that colleges are one of the places that on the weekends their parking lots aren't utilized, unlike Six Flags or something. I've always been telling myself, where are parking lots empty on the weekends? And you guys may have known that. But that's obviously one place.
Right.
That's right. Whoops, sorry about that.
Now, unfortunately, colleges were as prone to the beautification of parking lots as anything else was a number of years ago. So the lots, when I go back to USF in Tampa and think about the lots we had access to run autocrosses on, and I look at the lots that are there now, and I go, holy moly, the architects have gone berserk here.
Well, but let me offer another opportunity for a region, and that is street survival. Street survival is our giving back to the community for what we use on a regular basis. So say we use a parking lot at let's take Heartland Park, for example. Heartland Park, Topeka has a beautiful solo pad for us, and we're always using it and paying for it. But we also pair up with them and do the Tire Rack Street Survival Program on their site, giving Heartland Park that bit of advertising ability as well, that they are giving back to the community. They give us that site so that we can hold a street survival. That's our foot in the door. It's just building rapport with the facility so that they, too, can say, I do something to give back. But other SCCA regions have found out that if they do a street survival at a site that they would like to rent eventually, they get their foot in the door by holding that street survival there. So it's a win-win situation if folks hold street survivals, and that is a pet project of mine since we are only holding about 35 schools, and we have 110 regions. And some of these events are 2, 3, and 4 in one region are being held. And I'd love to see 110 events in 110 regions.
Yeah, okay, but give an overall description. Like, I know nothing. Let's say I know nothing about street survival. Sell it to me. Explain it to me real quick.
I think I can do this. Let me tell you a little background on how this got started. Here's some data for you to remember. 5,000 kids a year in the United States die in automobile accidents. 5,000. That's roughly 100 kids per state, if you wanted to average it out. That's sad by itself. The even sadder number to me is almost 190,000 children a year are seriously injured where it is a life-changing injury in automobile accidents. Now, as a driver, that is just a horrible number. I just don't like to think about it. So, the short version is, we SCCA members and BMW CCA and PCA and National Corvette Club have all gotten together to try and share good driving skill information with these kids. And basically what we're teaching them are advanced driving skills through 4 exercises and 2 short classroom car control clinics. It's a car control clinic. And they use their own cars, and that's the other big plus that not other driving schools do. And kids are, young adults do not transfer information like adults do. So for them, the kids to be driving their own school is their own car is absolutely perfect. Now, we have 4 exercises. One is a brake and turn exercise, which makes kids give up a little bit of speed or braking for some more steering. The other one is skid pad. We don't slide the cars out, but we show them that cars move away from the skid pad as power is laid down, and that they need to be aware that their car does move as they make a turn, and especially in adverse conditions. We have the slalom that teaches hand control on the steering wheel, and how well they can carve a car through a slalom should they need to. We actually move that in the afternoon to make it more difficult for them. And then we have the last one. Lane change. So if you're on an interstate and something happens in front of you, you don't have to stop, but you do have to be aware of what's around you so that you can make a quick maneuver and get around the obstacle before you run into it. So all of those exercises are there to support good driving on the street, situational awareness, We talk about distractions. Like, I am looking in this rental car that we're driving right now, and the screen is very inviting to punch the buttons and see what is out there. But that's like having a cell phone in your hand, if you ask me. And it's a huge distraction, and I'm still struggling with, I know it's a cool thing, but why do we have it in the car? And I'm sure there's been some talk about it nationally with the National Highway Organization. So that's street survival in a moment. But it's also a way for people to know that the Sports Car Club of America does support safe driving, that we're out here, that we play with cars. And we always tell them, if you want to learn more about your car, if you want to play with your car like we do, you have to come out to our events. We're not going to teach you that here. We're going to teach you that in a more controlled setting.
I was going to ask, do you show them, does anybody drive a high speed and just take them for rides on some little simple triangle drill with a slalom or something?
Yeah, we can show them how we go through it, and we try not to do that when we're doing the school, but we do invite them to come out. The other thing that we offer, if you're an SCCA region and you want to hold a street survival, every student that registers, the minute they register, they are becoming SCCA members, because SCCA gives a free family membership to every person who registers at the school. Now, the schools were built to manage 15 to 21-year-olds. However, we take a group of people called the 21 at heart, and if you're an older person and you want to take this class, I'm thinking for moms and dads even. We're more than happy to put them through the exercises. Now, they don't do high center of gravity machines, but, you know, some of the SUVs are allowed, not all of them. We definitely don't do trucks, even though I know in Denver it would be a lovely thought. But, you just have to draw it somewhere. And insurance doesn't get so happy when we talk about SUVs and street survival. But
rollover survival.
Exactly. Luckily, we've not done that, thank goodness. But we have a wonderful way to show people that the skills we learn as race car drivers really do transfer to the road, and you don't have to be going fast, but you can sure eliminate an incident, or you can minimize the damage done in an incident if you know what you're doing, and that's what we're trying to teach them. So it's an absolutely wonderful program, sponsored by the Tire Rack, of course, and just fabulous. So if anybody could do it, please call FCCA and get Scott Dobler's email, which is pretty easy. It's streetsurvival@fcca.com, and he is now the current national coordinator.
Great. I'll include the email address in the show notes as well. And that's where two things from my personal life. Distractions. All it took were girls in a car next to me and not know there's a stoplight coming up, crash. And then something really sad was my younger brother, actually my stepbrother, died in a car wreck. And I've always thought of autocross as, if the kids would come out there, they would learn that you can never drive that fast on the street safely, but you can do all this practicing and learn all these skills, like you're saying, beyond even street survival, that can help you if you're on the road and something happens, like a lane change or using the brakes really, really aggressively and such.
Exactly. And that is the basic premise of the program. I have to admit, summer is the absolute worst for seeing young people driving very poorly, and adults for that matter, but I've had my fair share of young ones this summer, and it saddens me to think that they're still thinking that it's okay to be texting on the phone and driving at 50 miles an hour and passing me on the wrong side, of course. It's crazy, but you get the idea. I think of it as my responsibility to share the knowledge that I have learned over many, many years so that other people don't make those mistakes on the road.
Yeah, and that's where one thing... Go ahead, Howard.
I was going to say, I oftentimes will get copies of videos of newscasts that cover a street survival event, at some location at a civic center or something. And
I heard a newscaster refer to it as graduate school of driver's ed. And I always thought that was a good way to look at it. It's a car control clinic that's the next step beyond driver's ed. And then the next step beyond that, of course, is doing, a solo school, whether it's an Evo school or starting line or something like that. But to your point about learning the boundaries, as you were saying that, I had another flashback to my MGB days. The first one, I think this may have been my first event, which turned out to be a practice test and tune event. And I remember at the end of the day driving out of the parking lot and thinking, I got it all out of my system. And for the next several days, I just drove like a regular Joe. I was paying more attention to what was going on. I wasn't always looking for the traction limit of the car, all of this, because I was able to work that out on that Saturday afternoon at this practice course. Said, boy, I can't wait to the next one. But in the meantime, I don't feel like I got to go doing stupid things on the street like I've been doing.
Yeah, and once you learn what the real level of grip is, there's no sense being on a street where you might have some rocks or gravel or something. There's curbs and things that you can hit.
Exactly. And cars and all kinds of other things.
Yes. Oh, that's one thing. I took my niece out right when she turned 16 or 17 to a Houston event. Didn't remember to ask her, hey, do you know how to drive a standard? No, she didn't. So my friend is teaching her to shift to second while I'm working course. So I'd encourage people, if you know somebody, a neighbor, anybody else, I quite often offer, hey, do you want to come out and autocross? They don't always take me up on it, but I think it's invaluable for some people that are just learning to drive to get out there and experience it, even if they're just a beginner for a time or two.
Right. The one thing we have not been able to fully address was the family membership that's given out to all participants.
Oh, yeah.
Of street survival, and then to invite those people to come out and see what we do and participate in some way. Maybe they don't have a car right then. Maybe they're just going to come out and work or come do registration in the morning or whatever we have that they might want to do. That's still a piece that we're working on and haven't been able to fully take part, and get those people out to do that. So the next step. What can I say? But yeah, the other thing I wanted to tell you about street survival is most of these programs that run, it's an 8-hour day. It is typically $75 is all we charge. These programs nationally can run as much as $400 and $500. Some programs are free. However, they're being highly financed, and that money's being covered by donors. So we do have Michelin and Enterprise who are also helping us with the cost of those schools. And we can get into what that grant money is later. But there's a lot of perks for a region to put on these schools. It's not just building rapport with their community, but to also bring together their different groups like rally, solo, rally cross, club racing. Every one of those pieces are represented in my in-car coach staff. And I am eternally grateful. And I do get some national office people out there every now and then who help me with registration, and Howard just happens to be my lead outside instructor. So it just brings your club together for the common good.
Yeah, that's because I don't know much outside of autocross. I don't even pay attention to other racing enough to know what's going on usually. So that's a good point. If you get out to some of the stuff, you can discover some other things and meet a lot of other people that are also obviously members of the SCCA and probably have some very common things or things in common with you.
Right. The hardest thing we have, though, is to get the kids to the site. And believe you me, no high schooler wants to get up on a Saturday or Sunday morning at 7 a.m., be on site at 8. They are about as snarly as they can be. However, after you check their car, get them seated in the seat, and take them around the exercises one time, you plant them in the classroom, they are biting the bullet to try and get out of that class. They will do whatever that classroom instructor tells them so they can get behind that wheel and drive again. It doesn't take us long to hook them as long as we get them there. We hope the parents do that.
And are you guys social and showing and sharing testimonials is so big in business and all the things I've been taking the last couple of years to learn more. The more you can get them to share that on Snapchat, on Facebook Live, any of that stuff will help their friends know about it. That would probably require a region to have a follow-up event the next month or something. But it's amazing how if they like something, they'll share it. And I keep coming back to if they could even ride with somebody autocross-wise or have some carrot sticking out there that, hey, you're going to drive your car like you've never gotten to drive it before. I don't know if that's allowed, but I think that'd be a nice carrot.
Could be. I've thought about that. I'm a little nervous about it because I am doing a car control clinic as opposed to a solo. We've used that little tag at solo before, but car control clinic, I like to wait until the end of the day and say, now, if you want to go faster.
Yeah. Like, that's where I even think of the triangle drill at one of the courses I helped instruct, or the figure eight. I mean, some of that stuff is, I would say, on the very safe side, but just amazing.
Yes, it is. It actually helped me with the solo. I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, a little side story. I remember riding with somebody in a Miata, and on the triangle drill, she didn't even slow down to turn. I was just blown away at how good a Miata was. I'm like, what? You didn't apply the brakes. It just stuck. Okay.
Yep. Some kids are very, very lucky. And we tell them that when they come out. Your parents really love you because look what they bought you. However, that kid that comes out with the great big old, I don't even know what, that the steering wheel looks like it belongs in a truck. I just smile and go, okay, this youngin needs to learn hand over hand because he'll never make it around the corner without it.
Yeah.
So we just smile and go, we know all these vehicles because unfortunately that's when we date ourselves. But so fun to see all the cars that kids come out in and the big smiles because it's their first car. And to teach them how to drive that first car is just incredibly rewarding.
Oh yeah, no, you're getting me enticed. I know we put them on here, and I've not made it to any. But knowing the history, especially in the small town I grew up in, is how many people died in car wrecks, I'm like, I should go check this out to see what's going on here. So I thank you for sharing that for myself as well as the audience. So it's a whole nother, like you're saying, other regions should get involved for all the perks. You can bring in more membership. It's good for the kids. It's good for the community. It's good for the people like Michelin and I wrote down, who else did you say? Enterprise for sponsoring the
Right.
local area. You can get into a new site, hopefully.
Exactly.
And that's right. Like
Exactly.
you said, up to 21 years, some colleges, that might be a good entry into some colleges as well to say, hey, let's put on a street survival here.
And hopefully that will eventually happen. However, we are in the 11th year of SCCA holding these events. And we haven't been able to break through, and I'm not sure exactly why. So anybody can figure that one out for me. I would love to hear it.
When you say breakthrough, give me your goal or what you would love to see happening.
Love to see more schools being held. I would truly love to see at least one school in each region per year. It would be just the best. That means we'd be running at least 110 schools a year. And SCCA right now meets the needs of about 1,000 kids. It's probably a little under that, but somewhere in that neighborhood, 1,000 young people go through that program every year, just in schools that are held by SCCA. Of course, BMW holds a few more than we do, and then we have a few other car clubs that are coming on board slowly. But it's such a wonderful program, and it's just not being taken advantage of, and it needs to be. I've even given out gift certificates for birthdays, for Christmas gifts from grandparents, which I think is a lovely idea. And my grandchildren, heaven help this, that'll be going on when they're old enough, they will get this as a gift when they get to high school because they really need to take it right after they get their license so that they don't start those really bad habits. In the state of Kansas, unfortunately, they're getting their driver's permit at 14 because we're an agricultural state. So I even want those 14-year-olds, please bring them to me ASAP.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember how fast can my little 85 Honda Accord go, but had I been able to autocross it, I wouldn't ever care to get it up to 85 miles an hour or whatever the max was, which was right around that. Because once you, if you like autocross, the first time you do it, you're just amazed. You're like, wow, that was fun. That was different.
Well, I'm going to hand you to Howard for a minute.
Okay.
Thank you, Ken.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, we're at a rest area here, so just as I was getting out of the car, I heard you referencing the kind of triangle maneuver at a solo school.
Yep.
Did I hear that right?
Yep.
Yeah, that the first time I saw it, in fact, I'm assuming this was where it came from, was in the early 90s, like 92 through 96, something like that, in conjunction with the what we now call Champ Tours, but tours back then. On Fridays, we would do a school that Yokohama at the time, who was a sponsor of the program, sponsored as well. And we had some of the top autocrossers. I remember Rich Fletcher was one of our leads, Stacy Reitmeyer, Renee Eady, several people. But I developed the program, the curriculum, and the exercises in conjunction with Stacy Reitmeyer, who was going to be the lead instructor all across the country, along with a couple other people. And she came to me with this triangle thing. I knew about slalom exercises and other things, skid pads, but she came to me with this triangle thing, and I kept saying, I don't know about this. And she said, believe me, it really works. And we set it up at the first school we did at one of these tours, and I was just convinced that this was the best exercise ever. In many ways, it just served so many purposes that ever since then, anything I'm involved with, I always try to make it part of it because it's so good in terms of car placement and hand positions and just a variety of things that are included in that. It looks so simple, but it's really a good tool.
Yeah, and I haven't seen that in a while. Not that I've been to all that many coaching areas, but that's a good point. That, and I think we had a figure 8 circle drill, which was also with a larger and a smaller circle. And just the transition between the two of slowing down and turning back in was also, those two things still stand out in my mind as those were great exercises for the students.
Yeah, when we did this triangle thing, I was astounded. To me, it just seemed so self-evident how you would do it. And when we got there with people that, because the school was geared towards people that had been running locally, but had hit that ceiling, and we were trying to encourage them to come to a tour because they could go to this school and hopefully break through the ceiling and enjoy the tour more and therefore become, longer-term participants. And when I started seeing these folks that were not national caliber drivers driving this triangle, and the really poor placement of the car upon approach and exit of each tip of the triangle, I go, wow, there's things I just take for granted that obviously are new revelations for these people. So again, the beauty and usefulness of something that was effectively a pretty simple exercise was quite astounding to me.
Yeah, I liked it too. Something made me remember sponsorships. Does SCCA want more sponsorships for Pro Solo, for Solo? If so, what entry level can people get into that, and what would you guys be looking for?
The answer is always yes, and the first level is to be a contingency provider. You get some of the exposure of being involved with the program, for a fairly nominal, cost, depending on what level of service you want out of it. But we're mentioned earlier about these proposal packets they send out each year to everybody that comes onto their mailing list, either going to trade shows or meeting them at races or events, or they come to us. And contingency packets are the first thing, and then some level of actual sponsorship. When they're sponsoring, obviously Tire Rack sponsors basically is the title sponsor of everything national, but we can break down events into components, either a sponsor of an event or a sponsor of a particular program. Like it could be the Tire Rack Champ Tour Series presented by XYZ. That's just an example. For instance, a national championship, it's the Tire Rack National Championships presented by Garmin Verb. Signed a contract with Garmin a couple of years ago to be the presenting sponsor of nationals. So it can be brought down to someone sponsoring the the Super Challenge or the Bonus Challenge out of Pro Solo or the ladies category. I mean, it's really, rather than saying here's our menu and here's the cost, it's what I was talking about earlier. Is it's really, I believe it's a little old-fashioned compared to the way some of this stuff is done these days. But it's best to develop a relationship and have conversations with folks to find out what it is they're trying to accomplish and who they're trying to reach and what kind of customer base, what are they going to use as a metric to determine whether their investment is successful or not. Then our goal is to match them up with one of our programs, or frankly, at times we've even invented programs, strictly corporate programs to service their needs. But yeah, a lot of times everybody just assumes, oh, you're SCCA, you've been around, 73 years. They just must be stacked up like cordwood, wanting to get in on the game. Well, we've been around a long time, but there's a lot of other players there. Whether you're talking about the new kids on the block like NASA or Chum Car or other parts of motorsports. And frankly, sometimes what's happening in other parts of motorsports has an impact on us that you'd never ever think that there'd be a connection. An example I mentioned earlier about Valvoline was such a big sponsor with FCCA in the early 90s. They were corporate wide. I mean, we had a big chunk of it with Pro Solo, but they were also the runoff sponsor and several other things at the time. Come 1996, and the split in IndyCar between Champ Car and IndyCar, and I don't remember if I got the names right now, but IRL and Champ Car, there were two basically IndyCar series, and Valvoline was caught trying to figure out who should they go with, who should they put their money in with, and whether they were going to gamble right or not if they did that. And they turned out being put their money behind the group that ultimately failed. So their approach, and several other companies at that time, was to, okay, we're not sure how this is all going to shake out, so we're going to basically, like some politicians or some companies do, we're going to donate to the Democrats and the Republicans. And so they basically split their money between IRL and CART, and to be able to have enough money for that to be meaningful to both of those groups, Valvoline had to retrench from all of their amateur motorsports activities, whether it's bus, motorcycles, or a whole host of things, and pool all that money so that they could have enough to present to both CART and to IndyCar to have a presence with both of them. So again, folks at the time say, well, the prize money for Pro Solo went away because of the split in IndyCar. People scratched their heads. What could that possibly have to do with us? But every company's got a budget on sponsorship. It's not an ever expanding universe of money that's available for that. So they're looking at the entire industry and where they can get the most bang for their buck.
No, and that's interesting. I like what you said, that you can go down to a one event sponsorship, it sounds like. So if somebody wants to sponsor something, you will work with them to try to find a place to fit them in.
Right. And in fact, there in Colorado, we were at World Arena for a couple of champ tours. I guess the Continental Divide region had a good relationship with the Subaru dealer down there. And ultimately, at the local level stuff, part of what a region gets is the ability to sell that event if they want, either to supplement the money for the social or their bottom line, or to make the event better in some fashion, or to as a way to ingratiate themselves as somebody who's been a sponsor of their regional program. And so we as long as it doesn't conflict with the tire rack or something else we might have going that year, they are allowed to pitch that. And then we support it by indicating on the schedule, the Colorado Champ Tour, presented by ABC Liquors or whatever it might be. and CDR did that for a couple of years with a Subaru dealer down there in Colorado Springs that they had a relationship with. So you're right. It can be at almost any level along the way, from the event at a local level to local folks, all the way up to being a presenting sponsor like Garmin has that national championship.
Nice. Yeah. In the back of my mind for a couple of years is trying to figure out some oddball giveaway for like the person who at nationals, their first run is the fastest overall compared to the class or something, or some kind of thing that almost keep you in a pro solo, maybe say, you didn't sandbag at all, basically, like some little more minuscule type, something you could get. Cool. All right. I'll keep.
And part of the reason I mentioned contingency, because I don't remember how long ago this was now, but at one point, I remember our marketing folks, I think it was maybe while we were still in Denver, for whatever reason, got it in their heads that, they needed to spend more time on getting event sponsorship, and they weren't going to spend any time on the contingency stuff. And that really came back to bite us in that while we as SCCA do not make, that's just small service fees that are paid to SCCA for handling that or verifying the results or whatever, depending on the level of how they want to get involved. But what happened was the contingencies dried up a fair amount that one year when they weren't really pushing them. And what that did is it drove participants to stay away because all of a sudden they didn't have the pool of contingency money they were used to. And so on a personal level, they could either afford to do it, or they might actually come out a couple $100 ahead at the end of the year, or whatever it is. We lost that, so and the big thing was we didn't necessarily, we lost some service fees, but more importantly, we lost, over the course of the year, probably hundreds of entry fees. Every year, if this discussion, not every year, but every once in a while when there's a new group of folks, and they'll say, well, do we really need to mess with contingencies? Well, you can do so at our own peril because it's important to the participant. So the kinds of things you're talking about, leading by the biggest margin on the first run of the first day or any of those kinds of things are all useful tools to encourage participation and to keep folks engaged and find the event more interesting and rewarding to them, even if it doesn't necessarily come down to yay or nay that they'll come back to nationals or come back to the tour, but it's all part of trying to establish an environment that seems like a fun and useful way to spend their 6 minutes.
Yeah, that reminds me. Who was it? I think there was a sponsor that paid like 5th spot and 3rd spot, but not 4th or something. Was it brake pads or something?
I do remember something like that, but for the life of me, I can't think of who it was.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking, so it doesn't matter who they are, I guess. Maybe giving a sponsorship for the person won out of trophies or something. I mean, I guess there's so many things you guys might consider doing that as long as you can verify it, or the people giving it away can verify it, more power to them.
Yeah, there was somebody a few years ago, may have even been Gum Out when they were first involved with one of their other product lines. They had indicated they didn't want to just keep paying the same guys over and over again that were at the top. They were interested in getting further into the results, and they had wanted to do some things. I don't necessarily, it wasn't contingency specifically, but I remember them doing that. They wanted us to be sure that during awards that the guys that were just missed out on awards or whatever were getting a case of gas treatment or something like that. And there's been a few of those over the years where the manufacturer or the supplier they come to the realization after a while, particularly if they've been in a few years, that we keep writing checks to the same 10 people. I don't think this is doing it for us. Even the tire companies came, and when we had a bit of a dip in the tire stuff, I forgot, this was somewhere in the 90s. That it sort of all of a sudden had a dip one year and then came back a bit. But one of the discussions I remember having with the guys was exactly that. They said, we're writing a lot of checks to the same 10 people, and it doesn't look good when I try to pitch this, up the food chain in the company, that we don't have a broader number of people that are getting rewarded for using our products. So yeah, we're always open to that element of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I got to thank Hoosier back in the day at the Pro Solos. I mean, I used more than 2 front tires every Pro to try to win 2 more tires. And then you had Honda really supporting at a large scale if you happen to win a Pro challenge. Oh, my goodness.
Well, Honda's one of those examples of, they've gotten much more involved in the last several years in IndyCar and, Honda racing, HPD, in a variety of different ways. And at one point it appeared that their support of Solo was going to drop away completely. And again, part of this is a changeover in personnel, but through discussions with them, we were able to remind them about how long Honda had been involved in Pro Solo, that they were really part of the fabric of the sport, and they really needed to stay involved. And at some point, maybe they could come back to the level they were previously, but to just drop away was not going to ingratiate them to this very loyal customer base they developed over a 30-year period.
You just gave me another idea how to get my spec Honda class. If they were a big enough sponsor, you guys might give them a spec class. I'm just don't knock it down yet. I'm still angling here. I like it. Yeah, that's one thing I think I probably said on one of these previous podcasts. I imagine if there was a spec, let's say CRX Civic class and a spec Miata, you would probably have 60 or 70 cars at Nationals showing up. I know you guys can't do spec everything, but sometimes I've realized, wow, it's so fun, at least for a few years, to have that.
Well, sometimes a spec class is not really a spec class. It sort of works out that way. When we used to have huge SS classes with the Corvettes, and now this year, I forgot to go look at the numbers before I left yesterday, but I got a note from Paul Brown who said, it looks like C Street's going to be so big, they might need 2 heats to be able to run.
Wow.
And that intrigued me. I was going to go look, because I know a month ago they had like 60 entries or something like that. So I said, I guess I really should go look at that to see how we're going to operationally handle that if they're too big. We had this several years ago when the CP guys were getting so big. They had reached something like 70, I think. And they were sure the following year they were going to have 80 to 90 participants. And boy, we were going through all sorts of gyrations trying to figure out exactly how we were going to handle that. That's when we were at Forbes, I think. And as it turned out, we came to realize that classes seem to have a ultimate size they reach, because sooner or later somebody doesn't like continually finishing 59th. They'll find some other place to go run, so they can only be 33rd.
I had not thought of that.
But at some point, a class gets so big it tends to kind of collapse on itself away. But yeah, this year C Street, between the new MX-5 and the remaining FRSs and BRZs, as well as RX-8 and some other things. But it's
all right. Give me your guess on class size right now. If I'm looking correctly on the website, what's your guess? How many you think are there?
I'm going to guess just shy of 70.
Okay, Linda.
I'd say it's around 75.
This says 82 of 1,300 total registrations.
What was that number again?
It says 82 of 1,300 total.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, we're over.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
When I checked last night before I left the office, we were at 1285. So obviously overnight we picked up some.
Wow.
82. Wow. Jeez.
We were just hoping then that number wouldn't increase until next year for the 45th anniversary.
So that means C Street is at least 15 cars bigger than the number of spaces we have on our map for grid.
Oh, wait, I didn't think about co-drivers, so maybe you're going to squeak through.
Yeah, could be.
Well, we'll be looking at that tonight. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah. Well, see, here, okay, we should set a goal. If you get to 100 in a class, we can divide the car by class or something. I'm liking this. I'm going to get us a lot of classes here. Just to...
Oh, yeah, I can't wait for the guy that yells, well, that's not fair. He got to run in the first group when the pavement was dry.
Oh, no, I'm going to split. They're going to be C Street 1 and C Street 2 with 2 national championships. We're going to split FRSs from something. We're going to have an FRS class and a BRZ class. I got it.
No.
Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, put that in the auto with the BRZs, would you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, C Street 2 is for the twins.
Exactly. There you go. And I bet you would get probably 60 or 70 of those. It looks like a lot of them obviously are the twins, but.
Yeah, that would be C Street spec.
Yeah.
There you go. And well, if you get the right sponsorship from, hey, and you got 2 competing cars from 2 manufacturers that can try to race each other, get them to pit money against each other. I like it.
Or maybe it could be Masters class is C2.
Oh yeah, we can start breaking out by age brackets.
Yeah, I like that plan.
Or we can get a pro class. Do you want to be in the pro class? If you finish in the top so much this year, you're in the pro class. You have to compete against only the other fast people.
Exactly.
Wow.
I like this. It's getting better.
So have we ever hit 1,300 registrations? I don't know how many drop out, what percentage, but.
No, we're, last year we had 1227 or 1228, and we were at, the highest it ever got was 1250, and we lost, 20 or so.
Nice.
25, like that.
That is awesome.
So, we had our cap set at 1350, so we're going to come close to our cap. We never, it's been a long time since I've had to think about that from a national standpoint.
Yeah, part of me wondered if the cap was 1,300, did it stop right here or it just happened to?
Yeah, after 1350, I don't even know what happens because I know we run out of daylight.
That's back.
Well,
Go ahead.
We actually had to, in anticipation of this, because last year we were getting pretty close to out of paddock space. So we were able to get from the airport another 500 feet of the area up where the test and tune course is. Now the test and tune course will move completely out of the paddock, and we were able to add another 3 or 4 rows. So I'm really glad we decided to go ahead and make that commitment and to do that, or we'd really be people would be out in the grass somewhere outside the gate, paddocking.
If my mind serves me correctly, this is the largest competitive auto event anywhere, not just in the United States, but anywhere.
Right. We've built it for years. No one's questioned it. It's the largest. I don't know about motorsport because we're not sure about motorcycles, but the largest auto sport competition in the world.
He had to get over 1,000 people to come out. And like other people have said on this podcast, you come out for the whole experience, even if you've never done it before. I remember coming out at first and seeing 60 S2000s in grid, or however many there were, 30 or 40, 10 or 20 Type Rs. It was just insane to see all these cars and all these different types of cars.
Yep.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it takes years for you to get the full experience.
Oh, sure. And that's where this year, if being that I didn't have but 2 pro solos that weren't well, if I can't make it to even run the pro solo, I want to be out there just for the experience. I had so much fun at the test and tune course at Spring Nationals, just hanging out with the people. I mean, that's a big part of the sport is you're not just racing for 6 minutes. You're hanging out with lots of people from across the country.
Right.
And if you're not racing, you actually get to hang out with them.
Yes. Yeah.
Or maybe you break something and they get to hang out with you. I'm not sure how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, I think the best advice for anyone new is to not let the size of the event completely overwhelm you, which is easier said than done. But particularly now with the size it is, because I remember being told that in '85 when I first came out, and there was only, I think between 500 and 600, I think. They said, just don't, keep your eye on the ball of what it is you're trying to accomplish and run at. We had come out with our solo V to see if we could be competitive with the top solo V guy in the country, Davey Lumen at the time. And I remember constantly starting to get oohed and awed by all these cars that I hadn't seen before. I mean, because, in a lot of locations in the country, you don't see a lot of mod prepared cars, for instance, or some of the more oddball cars. And being a car nut, it was easy for me to walk around and say, wow, this is just so cool. Look at all these things. I mean, heck, I saw a Volvo 122 running in prepared. And finally I said, okay, I can remember what they told me. Stay focused on what you're doing. And
you almost have to have tunnel vision to do the job well.
And I can tell you have to be healthy too. Like, you guys are used to doing this all the time. But when I was first there for 9 days in a row or whatever it was, from the Pro Solo to Thursday, Friday, I was just zonked.
Yep.
Oh, you wimp.
Yeah. Like, focus, what is that? Not that I use too much focus for racing, but I was just out there every day enjoying, like, what's going on? Who's racing now?
Yep.
Yeah. It does take a toll on you. You just have to set your pace. And these days, we're getting to where we know how to set our pace pretty darn good.
Yeah. Years ago, the Pro Solo happened after Nationals. And finally, we said, we just can't physically do that. The Nationals take so much out of you, and then you're done on that Friday or whatever, and you say, oh, by the way, now go set up 2 courses and get everything all geared up to start the next morning. And we finally said, this is just stupid. I mean, we're out here till midnight on Friday trying to get this ready so we can start on Saturday morning. It's much easier to do this on the front end, particularly since we have more responsibility for Pro Solo than we do for Solo National. I mean, we're obviously have responsibilities, but it's a team of people really doing it. They're just there helping to help direct it. But now it's, when the Pro Solo's over, I'm there on Monday. Monday's like a holiday in setup, because that's just so leisurely that we've got a whole day to just kind of get ready to go.
And the teams to do it. I mean, all those people who volunteer, all the time they volunteer, and they've been working on this for hours and weeks and gosh knows how long. I can't even fathom what Karen and Ron Babb are doing, and anybody else who has chaired Nationals. It's just, for seeing it from my perspective, being partially, married to this program is what I call it, you get a real appreciation for how many people it has taken to organize all these volunteers to put this event on. There's people beforehand, there's people during the event, there's people after the event, and we go out there and it's a totally vacant lot. And then all of a sudden the city appears. And then it goes again on Friday. It's just incredible.
I mean, how many rows are in paddock? For people who have never been, it's just like paddock takes up so many acres and acres and acres. It's just insane.
We did have, I think it was 20, and we're up to 24 rows of paddock space. Plus, it's 24 rows, because that includes the vendor row and the row for chiefs and officials, and then the third row starts the regular paddock. But there are 24 total rows that are used for either sponsors, officials, or participants. So,
how many region tents will there be this year?
Half dozen again.
There's 6 region tents as well. Those open tents like we had last year.
Oh, yeah.
And some of those regions go together, like Kansas and Kansas City are 2 different regions, but they do work together and they have a tent together.
And that's where the social aspect comes in.
Several years ago. Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we at one point we were talking about all those tents on one row and make it like fraternity row, and then someone talked us out of it and said,
they might actually get totally nuts if they're right beside each other and start competing for who could be the most bizarre.
I like it.
Yeah, we to see Colorado and Atlanta together. Yeah, I know y'all like the thought. That's why I said no.
Oh, you got to experiment. Just give it a try.
There has to be some adults around. Oh, good.
Yeah. I said my idea of Fraternity Row is sort of have the solo version of Bourbon Street in New Orleans.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody just be walking around, actually have them on both ends where cars can't drive in between. That'd be safest.
Right.
It's like
definitely.
It's a row party instead of a block party.
We have Texas. They've got their own little setup. Biggest grill I've ever seen in my life on a trailer. So yes, it is a sight to behold, and some great humor out there. But y'all be careful and be safe out there, please.
Oh, I've got questions.
We're about to the point where we're about out of gas. We're going to pull off. You've used almost a half a tank of the gas on this.
Oh, too funny. Sometime we should talk about volunteerism and how important it is for people to get involved in their region. These things don't happen by themselves.
Yeah, I mainly do course setup sometimes and course design. But yeah, there's a lot of people behind the scenes. That's where like the SCB and everybody a lot of things go on that I have no clue even are going on to make these events come off.
Exactly. You learned about street survival today.
Yes, more than I knew.
And you have one of the best street survival organizers in the country with Mr. Arnie Coleman.
Yes, he's on top of it. He is the guy that seems to spearhead everything that I see.
Yes, he does, and now he's one of your directors, and it is just awesome that he can keep going. He is a volunteer extraordinaire. All right, kids, this has been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great.
Thanks for listening. For the show notes and contact information, please visit autocrosstalk.com. There you can also subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on new shows as they come out. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes for the upcoming shows. You can connect to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autocrosstalk. You can share your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your suggestions there. Also share with your friends. Hopefully you found it entertaining and motivating, and hopefully other people will as well. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and check back next week for the next show.